North American detective. I am proficient in various American residences. Introduction. Gunfight+Case solving reasoning+decisive killing. I'm so black that you said I was assigned as an undercover agent by the police. Dean looked at the boss who couldn't close his eyes, scratched his head, and could only take advantage of the situation to transform into a 5-star good citizen of Los Angeles. Detective Dean. P.S. There is no extraordinary, but there are dark worlds that ordinary people cannot access, assassins, thieves, and various bizarre cases. Detective's position and rank, Los Angeles. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. 11.22 Addendum. Due to translation issues, the terminology may be slightly different. In order to make it easier to pronounce, please refer to me. Below is what I said, but today I have seen some facial expressions, and I will put this statement at the top. Police station positions. Detective, detective, deputy, captain, deputy director, director, and sub-director. The police station includes several departments, and the robbery and murder department is just one of them. At the captain level, it belongs to the management team. Police ranks. 12. Police officer, detective, superintendent, inspector, superintendent, deputy superintendent, and chief superintendent. The police rank is assessed based on years of service and merit, and it is not very useful. The protagonist initially held the rank of police officer, but because he joined the Department of Robbery and Murder, he held the position of detective. A detective's position is higher than that of a patrol officer, which can be understood as being a newcomer with the same rank, but one is in plain clothes for the serious crime unit and the other is in military patrol. Additionally, as seen in many American dramas, patrol officers belong to sub-bureaus, which are different from detective bureaus. Police recruitment is usually done through internal recruitment, which involves recruiting from various sub-bureaus and is relatively strict. However, there are also methods such as recommended admissions and direct registration, which require a good relationship or composition. P.S. The information is derived from a systematic summary of the Internet, and has been slightly edited for the sake of the novel's straightforwardness and translation conflicts. If there are obvious cognitive errors, they can be raised and the author humbly accepts them. But if it's not that kind of wrong and outrageous cognition, please refer to the settings in this book, and please be patient. This book's worldview and case studies. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The worldview of this book, for some reasons, belongs to a parallel world. The cases are all based on real-life cases, with some adaptations of real-life American dramas and other creative works. In addition, the main and side storylines mainly refer to some spy movies. In this world, there won't be anything like superpowers. But don't immerse yourself in reality either. As for some forensic knowledge, they are all notes taken by the author while watching the drama. Not guaranteed to be correct, try to give everyone a better understanding of different knowledge. Mrs. Haas, prototype. Dorothy Puente, character notes. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Tip. It's not like reality. Cough and cough. Parallel world, everyone understands. Mrs. Haas was born in 1938, when the American economy had not only recovered from the Great Depression but also experienced a sharp upward trend. But this has nothing to do with the young Mrs. Haas. Her father is a drunkard, and her mother is a streetwalker. She was born beautiful, but she never felt the warmth of her family. At the age of 7, she was beaten by her drunken father and almost died. After the injury recovers, Mrs. Haas was afraid of her family and chose to wander, but was eventually taken in by a charity orphanage. That orphanage is very famous in the local area. The dean was not only a well-known philanthropist, but also had close personal relationships with many political figures at the time. Mrs. Haas thought she had found a home. The result hasn't been a month yet. She is cute and beautiful, almost 7 years old, and has experienced her first reception. She is still very confused about this. But she gave it to the dean of charity and earned a lot of money. This ignorance persisted until she was 16 years old. She finally knew what had happened to herself and seduced the guards of the orphanage, fleeing in the darkness. By selling one's body. She finally arrived in Los Angeles, which was already bustling at the time. Mrs. Hass relies on her body to survive. Due to her experience in the orphanage, she didn't like to be restrained anymore, so she didn't join those gangs. Soon. She went through being prostituted, beaten, and robbed by customers, and finally joined the gang willingly until she met her destined person. A bastard who is interested in her selling money. Mrs. Hass got married for the first time when she was 17 years old. The marriage lasted very briefly. If the money is spent, the marriage will be gone. Mrs. Hass realized that she was in the mud and would eventually become a part of it, so she used her excellent appearance to join a dance troupe and become a dancer. At that time, America's economy was booming, music and dance were flourishing, and people were obsessed with money and money. Mrs. Hass quickly attracted a group of men who praised her through her appearance in the song and dance troupe, and during her career growth, she fell into the hands of a wealthy second generation for the second time. This marriage lasted for a long time, over 2 years. But when the wealthy second generation returned with a younger and more beautiful woman than her, she became even more thorough in getting rid of it. At this moment, she understood a truth. It's better to rely on oneself than on others. She became a dusty woman again, and with her improved perspective, she won over a group of women and eventually became a chicken head. This time, she made a lot of money for the first time. But she forgot one thing. The rest of the chicken shops are not just chicken shops. Behind them, there's someone covering them. So, the time for making money did not last long. During an anti-pornography campaign, Mrs. Hass's shop became the only sacrifice. She was also imprisoned for 5 years for organizing chicken sales. Prison is a good place. While allowing people to reflect, they can also learn more. But an accident interrupted her future progress. She got pregnant in prison. Yes, the prison at this time is also very bad. Mrs. Hass was fortunate to be released from prison early due to misfortune. Having children. She hesitated. In the end, she found a nursing home willing to take her in and became a helper. A peaceful life lasted for 3 years. During the period, Hass got married again. The other party is a Mexican. Older, but honest and upright, not smoking or drinking, very suitable for Mrs. Hass who wants to live a peaceful life. She once again thought she had found true love. The facts are very cruel. This man married her just to get a green card. He is in Mexico and has a wife and children. As soon as the green card is received, Mrs. Hass, she got kicked again. Even more tragic things have happened. She was fired. A younger and more beautiful girl who is willing to give herself has replaced her. Mrs. Hass, who is carrying a child, has completely blackened out. She took advantage of her experience in taking care of the elderly and, following the model of an orphanage back then, officially began her previous plan in prison. Social Security for the elderly. She rented a small old apartment and specifically took in some elderly people who were alcoholics, drug addicts, homeless, but all had Social Security benefits. Because she has experience taking care of the elderly, and people always need companionship. So Mrs. Hass's plan started very successfully. These elderly people, due to habit issues and weak social relationships, have no one to care about. The key is that their mental state is also poor and their reactions are slow. After getting familiar with it, Mrs. Hass began to imitate the handwriting of the elderly, like ants moving houses, gradually transferring their Social Security funds. Not many elderly people have been transferred. But as her charitable reputation grew and more elderly people joined, this became a significant number. She has become a millionaire. But Mrs. Hass was not satisfied with it. The experience of opening a chicken shop made her realize the importance of power. So she began donating to support some promising people in elections, publishing books, and building a reputation. But if you walk too much at night, you will always encounter ghosts. Mrs. Haas has been exposed. An elderly person discovered that their Social Security contributions had decreased and sued Mrs. Haas. Once the lawsuit is successful, Mrs. Haas will suffer a decline in fame and reputation, at most due to differences in social status. Those who have been donated will also be slightly taken care of to show her gratitude. After being imprisoned, Mrs. Haas will receive better treatment. But this is not what she wants. In times of despair, someone has found her. That is a well-known figure in the local area. He helped to smooth out the trouble that Mrs. Haas encountered, and made her career grow stronger without any worries the person is dead. The issue of Social Security funds will not be noticed by the elderly. Isn't that without any worries? Not long after. Mrs. Haas has a dense garden and green forest, several rotating and diligent elderly apartments, and her meals have improved a lot. She often sees stewed meat. In Chapter 1, I was all black and you said that I was an undercover agent arranged by you at the detective station. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In 2000, on the outskirts of Los Angeles. In a wooden house located deep in the jungle, exaggerated and arrogant laughter could be heard from time to time. We're getting rich. Ha ha ha, 3.8 million, that's a whopping 3.8 million. How many girls can you sleep with? A group of robbers who had just finished their robbery greedily looked at a table full of beautiful knives, holding burning marijuana in their hands. They looked excited and occasionally grabbed a beautiful knife and kissed it with their mouth. The forest outside the house. Dean listened to the noise inside the wooden house 7 or 8 meters away, lowered his head, and looked around at the forest environment with some confusion. Where is this special? Where is the ocean horse that I paid a lot of money for? After 3 questions about the soul, Dean instinctively trembled. It's like completing some kind of ritual after releasing water. A tingling sensation rushed from the spine to the forehead, clearly telling Dean that everything in front of him was real. This is time traveled. Dean realized the problem and quickly checked his body. It's really different. There are no more terrifying scars left by childhood punishment on my body, and no more calluses or scars left by practicing various skills on my hands using the large tree next to it as a reference. This body is much taller than in the previous life, with a broad skeleton, strong muscles, and full of strength, far exceeding the sickly body of the previous life. Dean, who lived in his past life, was an orphan. At the age of 8 or 9, he was taken from a welfare home by foreigners and taken to an overseas island, where he spent his extremely dark childhood. Due to physical reasons. Although he has a good marksmanship, he is not good at fighting. Fortunately, he has a clever mind. In the end, he passed the lowest required cleaner assessment among a group of cannon fodder companions and eventually became the outermost cannon fodder in the organization. Before crossing, Dean has just completed a task. He habitually found a protruding and upturned ocean horse, ready to relax his tense spirit. I just took off my pants. He was completely black in front of him. Open your eyes again. It's already a matter of things and people changing for traversal. Dean is undoubtedly very happy. He no longer needs to live that unpredictable and sewer-like life like a mouse. It's a pity for that ocean horse. I gave all the money, but as soon as I took off my pants, someone came over. The matter hasn't been done yet. After Dean calmed down, he found that his mind was actually carrying the original memory of this body, but it was still a bit chaotic and unable to bring him useful information at the moment. Due to professional habits. He looked around at the environment. This should be a forest with few people stepping on, and there are at least 6 or 7 people in the noisy wooden house not far away. Outside the wooden house, there are 2 pickup trucks parked. Behind the pickup truck were several oil drums that were half a person tall, with fresh soil on the tires and the doors wide open. Think of the fragments of words that came from inside the wooden house just now. Dean concluded that these were a group of robbers who had just finished robbing, and then hid here to avoid the limelight. What about myself? Thinking that I had just worn more and more, the owner of this body was releasing water. A bad idea arose in Dean's mind. I may be an accomplice of this group of robbers. He quickly checked himself and indeed found an M1911 full of bullets. In addition, he also had a spare magazine full in his pocket. Dean was angry. Damn it, I used to be a scavenger in my past life, but now I've become a robber again. I can't do without a life of licking blood with a knife, can I? Why is it so difficult to be a good person? Just as he lamented that he was destined not to be a good person, he took out a document with the Los Angeles police emblem from his left pocket. What is this? Dean opened it and found that it was actually a detective certificate from the Los Angeles Department of Detectives and the Anti-Crime and Drug Enforcement Department, with the name and photo of the owner of the certificate on it. Dean Lee. Surprisingly, his name is the same as my full name from a previous life. He has black hair and blue eyes, looks quite handsome, and looks a bit like an ancient Roman. Dean thought that this detective certificate was found on him, and his heart moved. He pulled a strand of hair from his head and found that it was black hair. Stone hammer. In this life, I am not a robber, but a detective. Perhaps the owner of this body was tracking these robbers to come here, and then had to urinate urgently. He temporarily released water and ended up occupying his body. At this moment, the crowd inside the house became noisy again. Dean leaned in and noticed that this group of people were discussing how to go after avoiding the limelight with these $3.8 million of knives. He glanced at the gun in his hand and heard it itch in his heart. $308 million. It's worth the commission from hundreds of missions in my past life. Detectives also have to live, don't they? Compared to solving cases and getting promoted, isn't eating black fragrant? As soon as this thought arose, it crawled and crawled like an ant in Dean's heart. Got it. Dean's eyes flashed fiercely, took out his pistol and loaded it, then switched to a spare magazine, maintaining the strongest firepower of 7+1 before touching the window of the wooden house. These robbers are so foolish that they haven't even arranged for a lookout. Dean looked through the window and saw the situation inside clearly. There were 7 robbers, all black. Among them, 6 people gathered around a table filled with money, holding a pile of bills in one hand and a marijuana cigarette in the other, their faces intoxicated. There was another person with an exceptionally strong physique, with muscles like molten steel pouring down his body. He was standing on a wooden stake with his feet, holding a cigar and exhaling mist, watching the 6 people dance around the table with contentment. Dean's predecessor seemed to have a deep impression of this exceptionally strong black man. When he saw him, some fragmented information immediately came to mind. Nathan, the leader of the small gang. This made Dean more certain of his identity as a detective in the Anti-Crime and Drug Enforcement Department. How else would you care so much about the other person's information? These people may have just been successful and are currently in a state of complacency, with long and short guns casually thrown onto chairs behind them. See here. Dean is helpless. These hanging hairs are simply seducing themselves to eat black. Remember the location of everyone. Dean walked to the door, calculated it, took a deep breath, and kicked open the wooden door. The loud collision caught the attention of everyone inside the room. Everyone looked at Dean, who had kicked the door in confusion, and the black man holding a cigar. They were stunned and even more unhappy, saying, "Dean, what are you posting?" Although Dean was surprised that the other person knew him, he was always too lazy to talk nonsense to the dead. Bang 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 bang. 8 consecutive gunshots were fired. He remained calm, dressed in a familiar American way of living, emptied his magazine in one breath, and knocked all 7 of them to the ground, screaming in agony. Especially the boss Nathan, who was carefully taken care of by Dean, fired 2 consecutive shots in the opponent's chest. The screams were brief. The M1911 in Dean's hand uses a .45 caliber bullet that is as powerful as a rifle at close range, and when it hits a person, it creates a blood hole. The group of people who were shot struggled a few times, then widened their eyes, blood soaked their clothes, and they looked as if they were dying without closing their eyes. In the blink of an eye. The originally joyful wooden house has become a hell filled with corpses. Nathan has a strong physique and has not completely lost his breath. He struggled to lift his hand, trembling as he pointed at Dean, wanting to say something, but only coughed up a few large mouthfuls of blood. Dean whistled, changed the magazine, squatted in front of the other side, and said jokingly, "I've never seen a detective eat black, why are you staring so big?" After spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, Nathan finally let out a faint voice. "FK, I asked you to go undercover at the detective station. You bastard, how dare you eat black?" Dean was stunned and said, "Damn it, I'm so black that you said I was an undercover agent arranged by you at the detective station. Get started quickly. My memories haven't fused yet, and I don't know if Nathan has his own handle in his hands. But on second thought, what a wonderful way to eat black. These people should all be core members of Nathan's team and know their identities. No matter how you handle it or not. Kill all the people. Isn't that equivalent to having no handle? No big deal. After memory fusion, you can read www.uukangshu.net and then clean up the remaining potential hazards. And as a black police officer involved in robbery, I definitely won't use my own gun, and I won't even need to leave any traces of damage later on. Think of it here." Dean lifted his pistol, aimed it at Nathan, who was on the brink of death, and cleared the magazine again. Kill 7 people in a row. The strong smell of blood, smoke, and marijuana mixed together makes people nauseous. Dean rubbed his head, which had become chaotic due to memory fusion, took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. Then, he picked up a backpack that had already been prepared and stuffed money into it. A beautiful knife weighing over 1 gram. Most of these beautiful knives have a face value of 20, with only a small amount having a face value of 100. As for 5 yuan, 10 yuan, and 50 yuan, there are none. These money add up to over 100,000 sheets. More than $3 million, adding up to no less than 200 pounds. Dean packed 2 large backpacks in a row before finally finishing the money. As the saying goes, killing people to silence, destroying corpses to exterminate traces. Although Dean's mind is a bit confused now, as a professional cleaner, he is still proficient in his business. He deftly wiped off the firearms in his hand and placed them in one of the people's hands. Then, he searched for identification documents and communication devices that could leak identity information from everyone, smashed and damaged them, and put them together. He also took a half-meter high oil barrel from the truck outside and began cleaning the traces. Bang! The raging fire ignited the wooden house. The wooden house is surrounded by open space. After Dean confirmed that the fire would not cause a wildfire, he glanced at the address on his driver's license, started his pickup truck, and headed towards the forest path. P.S. Welcome to the pit. You can take a look at the author's words. Chapter 2. What about playing with dolls? You are listening at novelfull.audio. My predecessor was so handsome, how could he follow the gang? Not afraid of being taken on the dry road by those old black people. Dean looked at his diamond-shaped face in the rearview mirror, feeling a bit speechless. This body should be of mixed race. Black hair and blue eyes, with three-dimensional facial features and a robust skeleton. Overall, the body shape leans more towards Westerners, but lacks the rough pores and rich body hair of Westerners. The undercover agent is already enough to fight the streets. Surprisingly, the predecessor was still an anti-undercover agent who was infiltrated by a gang into a police station. It's like playing in the street. From Dean's perspective, going to work as a duck or model is clearly more promising than being a black police officer. The days of licking blood with the blade are not easy. This industry is mostly just a mouse in the sewer. Now Dean only hopes that his predecessor did not have too much involvement with those gangs, so that he has a way back and can be a 5-star good citizen of Los Angeles who can stand in the sunshine. Otherwise, I would have to abandon my identity as a detective and sneak away. After driving south for half an hour, the pickup truck finally left the forest path. Dean's head is getting increasingly dizzy. In his mind, the memories of the two began to collide and merge, causing him to have much slower cognition. In this situation, it is not suitable to continue driving. Dean slapped himself in the face, using the pain to stimulate his mind and make it clearer. My predecessor just followed me to rob the bank, and now the situation is unknown and not suitable for staying in a hotel. He glanced around and saw that there were no vehicles in front or behind. He simply turned the steering wheel and drove towards the wilderness. For a moment, the car drove into a low-lying area and stopped in an area far from the road. Dean locked the car window, squinted his eyes, and slowly fell into a deep sleep. Buzzing. Dean opened his eyes in confusion and instinctively took out a phone from his pocket. He pressed the connect button and said, "Who?" "Dean." On the other end of the phone, there came a crisp female voice. "I heard someone calling my name." The confusion in Dean's eyes gradually dissipated and he focused on his phone. He shook his still somewhat heavy brain. This voice, somewhat familiar, seems to have its owner who is very important to its predecessor. Dean realized that he had not fully integrated the memories of his predecessor. He couldn't figure out who the other person was, so he blurted out, "Dean, it's been a long time since you called me. Is it convenient to answer the phone now?" The female voice is very gentle. Is this woman the girlfriend of her predecessor? Dean has a big head. He continued to blurry and unclear, "There's no one else around." "How do you know?" "He said so." On the other end of the phone, the tone immediately became serious. "Dean, what is the situation on your end? According to regulations, you must contact me every 3 days to report the situation, but now you haven't contacted me actively for 5 days. I thought you died in service." "Dean. Regulations. Martyrdom in service." Dean reacted quickly and said, "Hey, the regulations are dead, but on my end, there are always unexpected situations. By the way, you should be looking for me for an urgent matter, right?" After a moment of silence, the other side continued, "Very important thing. I want you to use Nathan's line to inquire about the recent bank robbery. That payment is a transfer from the family of Senator Snett. If you can get a clue, it will become very easy for you to get into the robbery-murder division, serious crime division." Dean was stunned. Robbery. Murder division. Bank robbery. Shit. Dean turned around and glanced at the 2 large backpacks packed in the back seat, feeling numb. He's a bit confused now. Nathan sent himself to undercover at the detective station and then the detective department sent themselves to lurk back to Nathan's side. How about playing with dolls? The woman saw that the phone was silent and asked, "Dean." Dean regained his senses, rubbed his still slightly painful brain, and tentatively said, "It's a bit difficult. I'm not black after all, and I can't fit into their circle yet." "Dean." The female voice became stern and said, "I'm not discussing with you, this is an order." "But." "No, but." The woman interrupted Dean directly and her voice softened a bit. Dean, you don't want your internship to fail, do you? When the time comes, not to mention the Los Angeles Police Department, the surrounding area won't want you to be a rookie who was fired during your internship. Dean. This woman's threatening words sound a bit strange. Moreover, with these millions, I can't afford to abandon my apparent identity as a detective and live in a different state. Who would be interested in getting into a robbery-murder department? Free America, gunfight every day. Dean has no intention of sacrificing his life for Americans. He perfunctorily replied. All right, I get it. Well, wait for your good news. After speaking, they hung up the phone directly. Is it a damn double agent? Dean pondered for a moment with difficulty, rubbed his still heavy head, and his eyelids began to droop, unable to resist the chaotic drowsiness that kept coming from his mind, and fell into a deep sleep again. Countless fragments of memory rushed in. In his sleep, Dean began to experience another Dean's life on the other side. Los Angeles Police Department, Department of Crime and Drug Enforcement. Eve put down her phone and looked at Dean's profile on the table, frowning beautifully. This chess piece doesn't give her a good feeling. Don't be fooled by Eve's harsh tone on the phone, in fact, she doesn't have many means to hold Dean in her hands. She was able to persuade Dean, a rookie, to go undercover because the other party came knocking on her door and wanted to go to the robbery-murder department. Besides that, Eve had no other means to manipulate Dean. The other party only needs to give up their police status, or in other words, give up their police status in the surrounding Los Angeles area police station, and they can completely submit their resumes to other state police stations. After all, in America, police are just a profession. It seems that I must find a way to better control this rookie. Eve's eyes flashed with determination. Bank robbery cases are generally not under the responsibility of the Anti-Crime and Drug Enforcement Department. But this bank robbery case involves Senator Snett. Once you help crack it, she will easily take over as the retiring captain. This is a great opportunity. She must step in. And Dean, as the vice captain, is currently the only person who can quietly use her hand. As long as the other party can obtain some information about the bank robbery, they can openly intervene, gain the favor of Senator Snett, and break into that higher level circle. Thinking of this, Eve turned her gaze to Dean's address. A ray of early morning sunlight projected through the car window onto Dean's tightly closed eyes. Dean let out a muffled groan and slowly opened his eyes. In his mind, the memories of two people intersect and merge with each other, just like two people living in a body. Half dull. Dean's eyes only regained their lively radiance. Reading www.uukangshu.net. He looked at the unfamiliar and familiar face in the rearview mirror, rubbed his cheeks with his hand, and squeezed out a stiff smile. From now on, I am Dean, a Dean who aspires to join the Los Angeles Robbery-Murder Division, to investigate the truth about his father's death. Of course, this is the idea of the predecessor. Dean doesn't have much emotional attachment to his predecessor's family. He doesn't want to be any detective either. However, for safety reasons, he needs to eliminate the hidden danger left by his predecessor, this idiot. The predecessor of this idiot, because his father died in a drug investigation, while studying, in order to facilitate his approach to Mexican drug traffickers, he actually approached Nathan and others, and deliberately revealed that his father was a former detective. He came from a good background and could easily join the detective department. Guided. Nathan actually thinks this is a good idea, so from the beginning, Dean's predecessor was intentionally approaching Nathan. However, he did not expect that after obtaining the registration qualification for the detective department due to his background, he was assigned to the anti-black and anti-drug department due to poor grades. He also encountered a boss who pressured him to find a gang as an undercover agent at will. And then the naive predecessor took the opportunity to return to Nathan's side, but those who knew about his predecessor's foolishness have already died in the wooden house. Strictly speaking, He is now Dean, an intern detective with an innocent background. The hidden danger in Dean's heart refers to a woman. This is related to whether he can safely swallow this $3.8 million knife. Dean touched the cold firearm around his waist, started the car, changed direction, and headed towards Los Angeles. Chapter 3. Hidden Hazards. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The pickup truck is driving on a wide road. Dean also began to organize the memories in his mind. He finally figured out his situation. This world is somewhat similar to a previous life, but with many subtle differences. It is more like two parallel worlds that are somewhat similar. His family is also somewhat complex. His father was a Los Angeles detective, a mixture of Chinese and Irish. He died 8 years ago when investigating a drug case. His relatives and friends gradually lost contact with him. At that time, Dean was only 13 years old. He had always suspected his father's death and had hidden secrets, which led him to engage in this foolish act of colluding with Nathan during his college years. He also completed his college credits early, applied for recruitment by the Los Angeles Police Department, and completed the corresponding 6-month training. However, because the assessment results of the police academy are average, before joining, Dean was transferred to the Anti-Crime and Drug Enforcement Division instead of the Crime Murder Division, Serious Crime Division, and was deceived by the Deputy Team Eve of the Anti-Crime and Drug Enforcement Division, becoming an undercover agent for exporting and returning to Nathan's side. Mother Hilla, of Italian descent, is the youngest daughter of a farmer. Through Dean's grandfather's relationship, she is responsible for handling crops on farms around Los Angeles and making a living, as an intermediary. There is a brother on top. Brother Beck, with brown hair and blue eyes, looks more like an Irishman. He is 25 years old this year and has become a professional treasure hunter with his uncle. He travels around the United States and rarely comes back. Below is a younger brother and a younger sister. His younger brother Thompson, 15 years old this year, is 6 years younger than Dean. He has just finished 9th grade. He is a bookworm with excellent grades. He is also the person with the most Chinese characteristics among the 4 brothers and sisters. Sister Sinclair, who looks the most like her mother, has brown hair and is 11 years old. She is in 5th grade and has a quirky and rebellious personality. Family relationships, further up. Dean's mother has 2 older brothers on her side. My uncle follows Dean's grandfather to manage the farm, while my second uncle leads Dean into the warehousing industry with a simple network. Simply put, Dean is a single-parent family, with close members including his mother, brother, sister, grandfather, and 2 uncles. Fortunately, my predecessor moved out early, otherwise dealing with these interpersonal relationships would have been a headache for me. Dean is not good at this. He licked his slightly dry lips and accelerated the speed. Dean fused his memory, slept all day and night, and now he is thirsty and hungry. He will have to clear the hidden dangers left by the robbery later, and must find the restaurant as soon as possible to replenish his state. After another journey, the surrounding vehicles began to increase. Gas stations, motels, and restaurants also appeared around the road. Dean stopped in the rest area, got off the car and casually bought some food, then continued driving towards the downtown area of Los Angeles. He didn't care about the threat from Eve, the deputy team of the anti-black and anti-drug department. Nathan and others have died. The foolish things I did before can be considered as having no future troubles. But after receiving the memory, Dean discovered that besides Nathan and his group who were killed, Nathan's lover may also know about the robbery of the bank cash truck. Nathan's lover's name is Anna, she is a hot-skinned Latin American beauty. The other party is a striptease girl with an open personality and even secretly rolls over the sheets with Dean's predecessor a few times. The intelligence about the bank escort car this time was learned by Anna from a drunk and accidentally told Nathan, which led to the robbery incident. The bank cash truck was robbed, and Nathan and others went missing. Anna, as long as she's not foolish, will definitely suspect that the money truck was robbed and related to Nathan and others. This is a major hidden danger. Politicians have hot money. If Dean wants to walk freely in the sunshine and fly away with over $3 million, he must solve this hidden danger. If the hidden danger is too great, so Dean would not hesitate to give up this $3 million bill and turn around as a rookie undercover agent to solve the money truck robbery case, maintaining his identity as a 5-star good citizen of Los Angeles. In his past life, he had enough of the ups and downs of life that could be silenced by the organization at any time. This life. He just wants to be a good person. The closer the pickup truck is to downtown Los Angeles, the more congested the roads become. Los Angeles has a developed economy, and during peak commuting hours, the traffic flow in and out is extremely exaggerated, directly forming a long queue of traffic. However, the scenery along the Los Angeles highway is very beautiful. On one side is the lush Pacific Ocean, while on the other is the steep cliff mountain range. It is currently evening. Under the sunset, a row of palm trees swayed with the evening breeze. On the nearby beach, you can still hear the laughter and joy of playing with children. Dean leaned against the window of the car with one hand, feeling the cool breeze, and pulling the steering wheel with the other hand, slowly weaving through the traffic, watching the sea along the way and listening to the noise outside. Feeling a bit uncomfortable due to traffic congestion, he slowly relaxed. Night falls. Dean finally returned to the city area. He has a temporary residence here, located in the Southern District, which is an old-fashioned apartment that has been built for over 30 years. The residents are all some first-generation immigrants, and there are also a small number of black workers. The personnel are mixed, and the environment is not good. The only advantage of an apartment is its cheap price and the ability to refund the deposit and leave at any time. Hide your money well. It's still early. Dean changed into a hoodie and drove his pickup truck to prepare the tools he might need tonight. As a professional street cleaner. For cleaning tools, reading www.uukangshu.net is not limited to firearms. Dean's favorites are nail polish and razor blades. Nail polish can cover fingerprints without affecting finger flexibility. Scraper blades are visible everywhere and can be used or thrown away. Even if found, it is difficult to analyze useful clues from the blade. Of course, sometimes Dean will use special glue instead of nail polish. Fingerprint detection technology is to distinguish fingerprint traces by secreting sweat and oil from the fingers. So as long as you ensure that the skin surface is smooth and won't continue to secrete anything, you don't have to worry about leaving your fingerprints behind. Be prepared for everything. Dean just drove his pickup truck to Anna's Strip Club. Anna's Strip Bar is located in the center of Los Angeles. In the city center, it sounds tall and upscale. But this area is actually a complete slum gathering area, hiding a large number of drug addicts, black workers, bankrupt homeless people, and gang members. It's okay during the day. Once it's evening, even the patrol officers dare not appear here wearing uniforms. Chaos and freedom are the main melody here. When Dean arrived, it was already over 9 p.m. The bar has just opened, and there is a long queue outside, with strong Mexican people maintaining order. On both sides of the street, there are also groups of drug addicts, making it very lively. Dean, wearing a hoodie and a mask, drove his pickup truck to an uninhabited alley. After cleaning up the traces on the car, he deliberately opened the car door, left the key, and walked towards the strip bar. No need for one night, someone will help him dispose of this pickup truck, change the license plate and modify it, and remove the last trace left by him. Chapter 4. Follow up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Entered the bar. Dean didn't ask anyone for Anna's location. This will leave a trace of his existence on people. He sat in the corner of the bar holding a glass, silently watching the performance on stage. Under the crimson light, ambiguous and intoxicated. A group of well-dressed gentlemen and white-collar workers during the day are now freely venting their suppressed hearts in a dim and chaotic environment. I waited for about half an hour. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, the bar DJ said passionately, "Gentlemen, the next one on stage is our beautiful Anna baby. Get your money ready." Under the flickering 5-colored lights, a tall and slender beauty, wearing a mask and a revealing flight attendant uniform, swayed in a seductive dance and slowly walked onto the stage, attracting a group of men sitting in front to shout and applaud, waving small bills in their hands. In the blink of an eye, there was a rain of banknotes on stage. Dean followed with a whistle. "This is a spicy girl. You're really good at dancing." Lanyo's dance became increasingly hot, and her clothes became thinner under the banknotes thrown by everyone. When there were only a few fragments left on Lanyo's body to cover up, she picked up all the money, stuffed it into stockings, and then took off her mask, almost walking towards the crowd without any trace. "Anna, hey, baby, you're so spicy tonight. Come and have a drink with me." The old customer below extended a salty pig's hand with money. Anna had a charming smile on her face and greeted them with ease. She blew a kiss to the guest who gave the most tips, then swayed her plump buttocks and walked towards the backstage. Stage time is limited. She must spare time for her other companions to make money. Watching Anna's figure disappear from the stage, Dean slowly took out a small jar of nail polish from his pocket, poked it, evenly smeared it on both palms, slightly dried it, and sprinkled the remaining liquor on his clothes before shaking his body and walking towards the back door of the bar. In this environment, it is not difficult to kill someone unnoticed. But Dean is not sure if Anna has told anyone about the bank cash truck. This matter involves a legislator with energy. Dean is unwilling to gamble. He really doesn't want to continue living like a sewer mouse. So, to handle this matter, a more suitable environment is needed. For example, Anna's residence. Bar changing room. "Hey Anna, won't you stay today? Your Nathan hasn't appeared for a few days." A black spicy girl patted Anna Chiao's buttocks. "No, I have something to do these days, bye, Susan." "Okay, bye." Anna changed her clothes, greeted her companions with a smile, and hurriedly walked towards the back door of the bar. The back door is located in a small alley. A few addicts huddled in the corner, half asleep and half awake. Turn around a corner. Anna also heard a few rough gasps. These are all bar toilets full, only men and women who can release their nature here. Anna doesn't mind seeing anything strange. She clenched the electric shock in her hand and quickened her pace. As a dancer in a bar, Anna is sheltered by the bar. Normally, few people dare to attack them, but sometimes drug addicts are not considered human, especially when they are addicted and unconscious. Step out of the alley. Anna's tense nerves relaxed slightly. She doesn't like this feeling. But in order for her daughter to have better development, she has to live like this day after day. Anna skillfully shuttles through the streets, trying to walk in some monitored areas, away from the addicts and homeless people lying on the streets. 7 or 8 minutes later, a patrol police car with flashing red and blue lights drove slowly through the street. Anna breathed a sigh of relief. She has already walked out of the chaotic area. Places with patrols will be much safer. Damn Nathan, he borrowed my mother's car and hasn't heard from her for 2 days. He wouldn't have really robbed the bank's cash truck, would he? Anna stopped under a street lamp, took out a cigarette from her bag, lit it, and cursed. Not far away, a few street-standing women dressed in cool clothes, carrying waste bags, were bored waiting for guests to come to their doorstep. Those are spicy girls from Eastern Europe, controlled by the Mao Xiong gang, a group of women who live less freely than her. They will provide door-to-door service. But only the young and spicy girls inside are eligible for this. After all, few people are willing to spend more money, but what they are looking for is a group of women who have already passed the best age. These street-standing women's customers are mostly customers who come out of strip bars, and they are often stimulated and have impulses in this regard. Every day, taxi drivers also bring people over to enjoy different services from Northern Europe. Anna is also waiting for these taxis. Not far away. Dean frowned and looked at Anna under the street lamp. My predecessor was very useless. Although I have played poker with Anna several times, I am not familiar with her and do not know where she lives. Otherwise, I don't have to work so hard to follow along. He originally thought Anna lived in a slum. It doesn't seem like that now. Dean thought for a moment, put on his hat and mask, walked out of the shadows, and walked towards Anna. Anna finished smoking a cigarette, but there was still no taxi coming. She threw away her cigarette but with some displeasure, took out her phone, and prepared to call her precious daughter, telling her not to wait for her and to rest early. Suddenly, she accidentally saw several street girls who happened to look at her strangely. Anna doesn't feel good and was about to look back. A sharp edge appeared on her neck from behind. Reading www.uukangshu.net. Anna stood still, holding her phone, motionless. Dean, like an acquaintance, grabbed Anna, locked her neck, and then took the electric shock from her hand before lowering his head and suppressing his voice in her ear, saying, "Baby, hold me, come with me, only rob money, not harm anyone." FK. Anna felt the sharpness and coldness of the blade on her neck, and could only snuggle up to Dean, like a couple being led forward. Upon seeing this, the few street girls withdrew their gaze and resumed their boring smoking and chatting. Walk out about 110 meters. Dean led Anna into a small alley in the community. Anna smelled the smell of urine in the air, lowered her head, and said with some unease, "Hey buddy, all my money is in my bag. You can take it all, but don't hurt me, okay?" Dean didn't speak, just looked at her with a stern gaze. No response received. Anna felt even more uneasy in her heart. She began to breathe rapidly. Behind me was still a dead silence. If it weren't for the arm holding her neck and not relaxing at all, Anna would almost have thought that the person had already left. She became increasingly uneasy and quickly increased her leverage. This is the territory of the Mao Xiong gang. They don't like outsiders taking lives here, as it would attract the attention of the police. Besides, I'm a dancer from Jenny's strip club or the boss of the Big Dog gang. Hey buddy, calm down. If you need it, you can still enjoy it to your heart's content. I won't resist, I promise to make you feel great. As she spoke, she also twisted her chiao buttocks. This seems to have touched the people behind us. There was finally movement behind the scenes. Chapter 5. Captain Eve, you don't want to lose this credit, do you? Major changes. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The heavy breathing sprayed on Anna's neck, causing goosebumps to rise behind her neck. The blade is slowly pulled away. Anna thought her words had an effect and couldn't help but twist her body even harder to perform, hoping that the other party wouldn't hurt her. The next moment, a big hand suddenly grabbed her hair. Bang! Anna's head was fiercely pressed against the cold wall, causing her to almost faint. The piercing pain from her scalp kept her awake. Anna could only be forced to raise her head, stick to the wall, and alleviate the pain. I say, you answer, one more nonsense, one more lie, hesitate for a second, you won't even see tomorrow's sun. The deep and hoarse male voice made Anna tremble all over. She wanted to nod, but her head couldn't move. She wanted to speak, but because her throat was pressed against the wall, she could only make painful moans. Just as her fear reached its limit, the hand pulling her hair loosened. What's your name? Anna Taylor, my name is Anna Taylor. Where do you live? Anna's body trembled and hesitated. Because her daughter is in the residence. The next moment, Anna only felt a pain in her wrist, and a moist sensation surged out of her left wrist, ticking and falling uncontrollably to the ground. This knife is only a few strands of hair away from your artery. You can continue to hesitate, but the next knife will disqualify you from enjoying everything. The voice is cold and hoarse. Anna was frightened and her whole body went limp, tears streaming down her face. The most terrifying thing in the world is not the moment of death, but the waiting on the tightrope of death without knowing when it will come. Anna's psychological defense line was completely shattered. She leaned half-paralyzed against Dean and sobbed, saying, "Apartment 72 Chinatown, 502. Which Chinatown? There are 2 Chinatowns in Los Angeles." Anna answered very quickly this time. "Los Angeles Square, the Chinatown of the historic neighborhood." "How much do you earn per month?" $6,000 or $7,000, but I don't have much savings. Dean seems to be chatting, shifting from simple information to privacy, and then from privacy to some shameful questions. Anna also gradually became numb and became an answering machine. "How many people did you tell about the money truck at Hogan Bank?" 8. 9, I'm sorry, I can't remember clearly. There were a lot of people at the time, and I had a drink. I can't remember how many people there were. Dean. Shit. He seemed to see those small coins leave him. This woman. It's okay if we can't control it from below, and we can't control it from above either. Anna, who was numb, had her pupils contracting violently and her body trembling again. She understands who the person coming is now. The cash truck at Hogan Bank was robbed, and Nathan and others lost contact at that time. Anna speculated that Nathan and his team had made the move. The person behind her must be the customer who leaked information about the cash truck here. It's over, I'll die for myself. Damn Nathan. At this moment, Anna's mind was filled with many forgotten memories, which finally settled on her daughter's sweet face. She is so regretful. Regret for being too talkative. I also regretted choosing to be a stripper for the sake of relaxation, and ended up getting to know Nathan. If there is still a chance, she will definitely choose to be an ordinary waitress, as long as she can support her daughter. Dean was silently pondering. Anna, however, became more and more afraid as she thought about it, as if she sensed her fate ahead, and there was a smell of urine coming from under her body. She was scared to pee. Dean's hands were steady. His long life as a scavenger in his past life made him feel indifferent in his heart. Next. He just needs to gently stroke the blade along the muscle texture, and the concentrated blood will spray out of Anna's throat, making her unable to scream, and the blood will not be everywhere, only splattering an arc on the wall. Quiet and efficient. But all of this is meaningless. When something is known by more than 5 people, it is no longer a secret. That money is no longer guaranteed. Great, I like your cooperation. Now, close your eyes, count 100 times before opening your eyes, and you can go to the hospital. Dean sighed in his heart, withdrew the blade, and turned to leave. He doesn't like meaningless killings. I'll count. Anna felt the blade leave her neck, her heart heaving, and she leaned limply against the cold wall, tightly closing her eyes. A dark alley. The oblique shadow elongates. The sound of footsteps faded away. In the cold night breeze, one can vaguely hear a woman trembling and counting return to the temporary residence. Dean checked the mechanism he left behind and confirmed that no outsiders had intruded, so he fell asleep. Anna didn't die. Leaving over $3 million in hand is a hidden danger. Dean is planning to contact Eve again tomorrow to see if he can use this credit to switch to a relaxed elderly care department. After all, being a 5-star good citizen of Los Angeles also requires considering the challenges of life. Early the next morning. Dean is still asleep. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door outside the house. Dean woke up from his sleep and reflexively pulled out his pistol from under his pillow. He rolled over and rolled to the bottom of the bed, his eyes fixed on the door. Dean, are you there? A soft female voice sounded outside the door. Eve. Dean had already fused his predecessor's memories and immediately recognized that it was his superior, Eve, the deputy captain of the Drug Inspection Department, outside the door. What is she doing here? After thinking about it, Dean remained silent and carefully pulled the sheets flat, hiding behind the curtains. Outside the house, Eve, dressed in a hoodie and wearing a hood, glanced left and right at the hallway when no one answered. After confirming that there was no one, she put on gloves, took out a piece of wire from her pocket, and inserted it into the door frame. Gently twist twice. With a light click, the door of this old apartment has opened. Eve pushed open the door and glanced at the empty room. Seeing no one inside, she walked in and closed the door again. She walked straight to the head of the bed, took out a bag of white material from her pocket, and stuffed it into the seam of the bed. Do all of this well. Eve stood up, ready to leave. Suddenly, she looked at the sheets, took off her gloves by a stroke of magic, and reached out to touch them. Warm. Not good. Eve's heart tightened. The next moment, a black shadow suddenly pounced from behind the curtain and struck her neck hard. Eve let out a muffled groan, her eyes darkened, her consciousness blurred, and she slammed heavily onto the bed. Dean walked forward expressionlessly, took out handcuffs from Eve's waist, baked her backhand, and continued to search for a firearm, a rare handheld video recorder, before reaching into the bed and taking out the bag of white material for examination. As expected, this is a pack of drugs, weighing about 500 grams, which has reached the standard of severe punishment. Eve sneaked in, stuffed a pack of drugs, and carried a law enforcement recorder and firearms. It goes without saying what she wanted to do. This stinky girl wants to slander him. It must be the last time I called. The other party noticed their perfunctory behavior and wanted to use this method to blackmail and control themselves. Dean had already flown away last night because of a large sum of money, and he was holding back a lot of anger. Now it's even more popular. He saw signs of conscious awakening from Eve lying on her stomach, sneered, helped Eve lean against the bedside, picked up the video recorder in his hand, and pulled out 2 large bags of cash from under the bed, opened them and placed them in front of Eve. After more than 10 breaths, Eve suddenly opened her eyes and looked around in panic, only to see 2 large open bags. The big bag is full of cash. This is surprise or not, Deputy Eve? Dean's voice came from her side. Eve's eyes flashed with panic. She turned to the side with a stiff neck and said, "Hi Dean, I think there's a misunderstanding between us." Misunderstanding? Dean wore a gentle smile on his face and gently caressed, "Eve, I risked my life to find the stolen money, but you wanted to frame me. I'm very sad now." Eve saw the salty pig's hands groping around, but she didn't dare to speak up to stop, afraid of stimulating Dean. She squeezed out a charming smile and twisted her body, saying, "Dean, that's great. You've done a great job, and I'll definitely help." "Shut up." Dean squeezed his palm hard and interrupted Eve's words. Eve took a cold breath in pain. She suppressed the pain and said, "So what do you want?" "Kill me. And with this money, you're being chased by the police and legislators, even affecting your family. Dare to threaten me?" Dean threw a big pussy over and threw it in Eve's face. Eve's right cheek is reddened and swollen at a speed visible to the naked eye. Withdrawing his palm, Dean felt much more at ease in his heart. Faced with Eve's angry gaze, he reached out his hand and opened Eve's handcuffs. "What I want, it's up to you. You break the trust between us with your own hands." UU reading www.uukangshu.net makes me feel insecure. If you're willing to rebuild this trust. Dean pointed to the pile of money and said, "The credit is still yours. By the way, you will also gain the friendship of Congressman Snett. But I heard that he has a high voice now and has a great chance of being elected as the next mayor of Los Angeles. Eve regained her freedom and wanted to find a chance to subdue Dean. However, upon hearing his words, her breathing involuntarily intensified, and even the pain in her cheeks eased a bit. She blinked at Dean and whispered, "So, what do you want me to do?" Dean leaned in her ear and murmured twice. "Impossible." Eve pushed Dean away with a shy and angry expression. Dean sneered and pulled Eve's hair, saying, "With this money, I can still be transferred out of the Anti-Crime and Drug Enforcement Department without going through you, but what about you? Captain Eve, you don't want to lose this credit, do you? A woman like Eve is more like a politician, who uses all means to achieve her goals. Dean doesn't believe she has a bottom line." Sure enough. Hear Dean's threat. Eve didn't hesitate for too long. Dean breathed a sigh of relief. He adjusted the angle of the video recorder in his hand, covering all the cash and Eve's appearance, striving to capture images with artistic appreciation. With this recording. Afterwards, if Eve wants to turn her back, she also needs to consider the consequences. Although this woman looks good, she is peaceful and makes him have no thoughts. My own blood loss. Dean let out a sigh in his heart. I just want to be a good person. As a result, this is a whole hay. It's really difficult. Chapter 6. Going Home to Grow Old. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Eve widened her eyes. Dean let out a long sigh of frustration. Everything is dull and tasteless. He took out the storage card from the video recorder, threw it to Eve, sat aside, leisurely lit a cigarette, and started to smoke. Eve gave him a white glance and, after finishing her appearance, said sternly, "All right, Dean, I think we have re-established friendly trust. Can you now talk about the situation with these stolen funds?" "Of course." Dean stood on his legs, exhaling a mouthful of smoke, and said contentedly, "The matter is very simple. The bank cash truck was snatched by Nathan's group of people. Senator Snett's family was obviously not very strict with their mouths. At Jenny's strip club, they revealed the situation of the cash truck. After Nathan and others learned about it, they planned the robbery." Eve couldn't help but feel a little lost as she looked at Dean's faint face in the smoke. How come I didn't realize before that this rookie has such a masculine vibe? I just don't know how effective it is to fight with real weapons and knives. Think of it here. Eve had a vague expectation in her heart. She licked her lips and approached Dean with mist in her eyes. "So how did all this money get to you?" "Dean, you know, all of this needs to be reported." Dean keenly felt Eve in front of him, as if something was wrong. He recoiled somewhat uneasily, his expression unchanged as he said. "Nathan's gang learned about Morgan Bank's cash truck through a dancer and robbed it. Coincidentally, Deputy Eve from the Anti-Black and Anti-Drug Department, arranged as an undercover agent, intern police officer Dean, has just infiltrated the internal workings of this small gang. Nathan and his group fled to the forest cabin with the stolen money, preparing to share the spoils, but due to uneven distribution, they fought against each other. In the end, all the bandits died. The gasoline that was unfortunately ignited in the wooden house turned into fly ash. And our lucky one, Dean, was an undercover agent and effortlessly brought these stolen funds back and handed them over to our superior, Deputy Eve. What do you think of writing the report like this?" Eve nodded obediently and said, "It's very reasonable." "That's good." Dean stood up and returned Eve's gun to her, saying, "I will send you the location of the wooden house through text message. I'll leave it to you to handle. As for my job change, I'll wait until the case is closed." After speaking, Dean is ready to leave. Eve's gaze at him became increasingly inappropriate. He doesn't want to trouble himself anymore. "Dean, wait a minute." Eve quickly stopped Dean and said, "Dean, I know the life of an undercover agent puts a lot of pressure on you." Dean frowned slightly and said, "What do you want to say?" She lifted her hair and looked at Dean with seductive eyes, licking her lips and saying, "What I mean is, you need to release the pressure properly. Good guy. This is not satisfying after eating it once, still want to use it. Beautiful you. Dean, who was wearing pants, always spoke tough. He pushed Eve away with a serious and upright expression, saying, Deputy Eve. Please take care of yourself. I am a clean man. After speaking, Dean didn't look back and left the apartment. Eve was mercilessly rejected, angry and embarrassed, and broke through the defense directly, cursing at Dean's back leave the apartment. Dean walked aimlessly on the street. He just discovered something very serious and deadly. He has no money to use. Eve came to suddenly and her skills were good. Before Dean could even make a move, over $3 million were all turned into stolen money. The police station pays salaries every 2 weeks. And there is still over a week until the next salary payment. He is now a real poor person with a total of less than $200, all over his body. I didn't expect to have a day when I was also short of money. Dean leaned against a corner of the street with a headache, pondering whether there was any way to make some money on the spot. He cherishes his current status as a good citizen. Some money-making methods that may bring hidden dangers can be passed directly. But apart from killing, arson, and robbery, Dean can't think of any other means of making money for himself. It's impossible to be a duck on your own. Dean covered his forehead in distress. There is no way to open source, so we have to cut costs. I can't afford to rent a house anymore. Additionally, you can also contact Eve to reimburse your previous rent and living expenses. This woman didn't give herself any undercover funds before. A penny cannot defeat a hero. Dean was forced to haggle over every detail. After much thought, he realized that he was still clinging to old age, which was most suitable for his current situation. Do whatever comes to mind. Dean took out his phone, found Sheila's number, and dialed over. Dean. On the other end of the phone, there came the voice of Mother Hilla. The other party should be making breakfast and can still hear the sound of the juicer. Dean opened his mouth and said somewhat unnaturally, Hey, Mom, good morning. No, I'm not good at all. What's wrong? Because my precious son, since his internship, not only has he moved out, but he hasn't called back for many days. There was a noticeable displeasure in Sheila's voice. I'm sorry, Mom. You know, I've been busy with a case these days, but now the case has ended. I'll come back to see you tonight. Are you sure? Okay. That's good, I'll prepare your favorite fried bacon in advance. Don't forget to promise gifts to Thompson and Sinclair, they've been talking about it for a long time. Okay, Mom. Dean hung up the phone, feeling a bit lost. Reading www.uukangshu.net. He was an orphan in his past life. When he was very young, he was taken away from the welfare institution by the organization and trained as a professional street cleaner. Family, with him, is a very unfamiliar vocabulary. For the evening meeting, Dean felt uneasy but also had some longing. He took a few deep breaths, calmed his mood, picked up his phone again, and sent Eve the location of the forest cabin where Nathan and others were buried. He also mentioned the reimbursement of his undercover expenses. Eve didn't reply to the text message, but called directly. She was clearly in a good mood and said, Dean, those money has been taken back to the police station. When we find the wooden house you mentioned, it will take at least 2 days to close the case. Deputy Eve, congratulations to you. Thank you, Dean. It's thanks to you. I'd like to treat you to dinner tonight and talk about your request to reimburse undercover funds. Dean rolled his eyes. Do you want to eat? I clearly want to eat him. He couldn't help but say, no need, Lieutenant Eve. I haven't been back for days due to undercover work. I'm going home to take a look. Eve was a bit disappointed and said, okay, I'll give you 2 days off. When you come back, we'll talk about the reimbursement of undercover funds. Hang up the phone. Dean contacted the landlord again. After he agreed not to pay the rent for the next few days, the landlord readily agreed to refund the deposit to Dean's account. That was originally a temporary residence. Dean is too lazy to go back and pack those few clothes. He also needs to buy gifts for his younger siblings. But the next phone call completely shattered his deployment. Chapter 7. Seeing your sister's first glance, you are my good brother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dean looked at the unfamiliar number on his phone and answered in confusion, "Hello, this is Dean." "Hello Dean, I'm Nell, Mars' sister." On the other end of the phone, a crying female voice came through. Max. Upon hearing this name, Dean's mind immediately conjured up a bright smiling face and an almost forgotten past. To be precise, this is a precursor event. Moss was Dean's former high school classmate, and their relationship was very close. It wasn't until Dean went to college that their connection gradually diminished. Dean did hear from Max that he had a sister named Neil who wanted to get him together, but because Max's sister had been studying in England since childhood. So the two have not met before. After graduating from high school, Mars became a private detective due to the influence of some detective novels. Initially, Mars joked to Dean that if given the opportunity, he would help investigate his father's situation. But in reality, the two have not seen each other for over 2 years, and only send each other a text message to wish them well during holidays. Is it Dean vaguely felt that he was about to encounter trouble? Dean. Are you still there? On the other end of the phone, there continued to be the crying voice of Sister Mars. Dean interrupted the memory and said, "Yes, Neil. I just remembered the wonderful time reading with Moss. Is he okay?" "No, he's not very well. My brother passed away 2 days ago and he was shot." "I'm sorry, when will he be buried? I want to say goodbye to him for the last time." Dean's face was not sad, but his voice became much lower. He is just a fake with a memory of his predecessor, and it is really difficult to empathize with the death of his former friend. Neil sniffled and choked. "My brother's body is still being preserved in the forensic department. They said we need to wait for the autopsy report before we can take him away." She could no longer speak and burst into tears on the other end of the phone. Autopsy means that the deceased will be dissected and become incomplete. This kind of behavior can easily make sad family members feel even more uncomfortable, but it is also a necessary step in collecting evidence. Dean pursed his lips and remained silent. After Neil's crying subsided, he spoke up and said, "I'm sorry about Max's experience. Is there anything I can help with? I want to do something for Max." "No need, Dean. I'm glad my brother has you as a friend." Neil calmed down and continued, "Actually, I called you today because while I was packing up my brother's belongings, I found out that he had left some things for you. There was also a letter, but it didn't go out in time. If you have time, you can come and pick it up, or I can mail it to you." Dean had a premonition that Moss's death might be related to those things. Hey. Trees desire tranquility, but the wind never stops. I inherited the body of my predecessor, and there are some things that cannot be avoided. Dean sighed in his heart and said, "Neil, is Moss's address still in its original location?" "Okay, I'll come over and pick it up myself, and by the way, I'll go see Moss." Hang up the phone. Dean dialed the phone to Sheila. Sheila was always too idle and answered the phone quickly. "Dean, let me guess. You called me again. It's not going to be anything. You can't come back at night, can you? If so, I promise to come to you personally with my whip." Dean. This mother seems a bit tough. "Mom, this is the situation." Dean told Sheila about Moss's situation. "Oh, my God, is the horse you're talking about the one you often play with in high school? I never expected such a thing to happen to him. All right, baby, I forgive you. If you need it, I can lend you the car. Can you lend me some more money?" Dean climbed up the pole, licking his face and saying. He doesn't have enough cash, accommodation, and credit card credit. Get lost. By the way, where are you now? Hilla was aggressive on the phone, but she really hurt Dean. Not long after the two ended their conversation, she drove her own car and arrived at Dean's location. Not only did she leave the car key to Dean, but she also brought a prepared fried bacon and $1,000 in cash. Dean looked at Hilla's departure with a warm heart. Is this family? That's great. Dean is inherently lacking in love. In his world, there is no family, no love, no friendship, only cold tasks and cold money. When Dean felt a little warmth from Sheila, the memories of his predecessor in his mind became more empathetic. In his heart, he also began to accept the fact that Sheila was his mother. That awkward throw, by the moment Sheila came over, had already disappeared without a trace. Dean put the sliced fried bacon into his mouth, started the car, and a smile unconsciously appeared on his face. Someone cares, it's great. Las Vegas is the largest city in Nevada, several hundred kilometers away from the city of Los Angeles where Dean is located. Dean departs around 10 o'clock in the morning and arrives around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Las Vegas, as a relatively new city, has spacious roads and a large number of tourists coming and going, surrounded by many resort hotels and casinos. For this place, Dean's first impression was heat. The sun is shining brightly overhead, and the people on the street are dressed in cool clothes. Riding a bicycle on UU reading www.uukangshu.net looks very leisurely. As he looked around, a sweet-looking brown-haired girl in a T-shirt walked up to Dean and said, Dean. Dean immediately realized that this was Neil when he saw her red and swollen eyes. Neil has a petite figure, her sweet face adorned with a few freckles, and her red and swollen eyes exude a hint of melancholy, making one unable to help but feel a sense of pity. Oh no, it's a feeling of excitement. Dean quickly opened his hands and said, Neil, it's nice to see you. Actually, Moss is my best brother. I'm sorry I wasn't by his side when he had an accident. When it comes to Mars. Neil's eyes couldn't help but mist, and she hugged Dean tightly, as if she could feel her brother still by her side. Dean gently patted Neil's shoulder. At the moment he met Neil, he regarded Moss as his true good brother in his heart. As a brother, Neil, he has taken care of it. Okay for a while. Neil just released her hands. She wiped her eyes awkwardly and said, I'm sorry, Dean. When I saw you, I couldn't help but think of my brother. Although we haven't been together for a long time, he treats me very well. It's okay, Neil. I'll be your brother from now on, which will make me feel better. Dean waved his hand generously and let Neil board the car. Due to the large number of tourists and being located in the desert, Las Vegas has a residential area located outside the scenic area, with many bungalows and relatively surrounding areas. Under Neil's guidance, Dean turned 7 or 8 and finally stopped in front of a 3-story villa. The things and letters left for him by Mars are here.